Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere unusually noisy for a bedtime story. Ancient Rome. You'd think marble streets and poetic fountains would sound serene under the moonlight, but no. Tonight, you're trudging through a city that never, ever shuts up. Iron-rimmed wheels shriek against cobblestone. Donkeys bray like rusty horns, and someone 2 floors above you is still arguing about lentils. And there you are, lying awake, staring at the ceiling of your cramped insula apartment, promising yourself you'll invent something, anything that might make the city shut up for once. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough, let me know your city and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You can almost feel the Roman air, warm, dusty, and thick with the scent of baked bread and horse sweat. The streets are slick with olive oil runoff from taverns, and every wheel that rolls past echoes like thunder in a marble canyon. You shift on your cot, thinking about the idea that's been gnawing at you for weeks. If someone could invent a chariot that didn't sound like a thunder god's tantrum, they'd be a hero. Maybe even get a statue near the forum. But mostly, you just want one full night of sleep. You rise before dawn, wandering to your workshop, which is really just a corner of your landlord's stable where you've claimed a wooden bench. A few scraps of iron, a half-finished wheel, and the smell of horse droppings greet you like old friends. You run a hand along a curved plank, feeling for the tiny ridges that catch against stone. The problem isn't just noise, it's vibration. Every wheel that hits the cobbles sends a hum through the entire frame, like the chariot itself is complaining about having to work so hard.
You think of Pliny the Elder's scrolls on materials, how certain woods are denser, smoother, quieter. He probably didn't mean quieter, but you read it that way. Historians still argue whether Romans actually worried about street noise, but judging by the way your neighbors yell, "Quiet!" every night, it's safe to assume they did. You experiment mentally, sketching imaginary wheels in the air. Maybe a layer of leather on the rim. Maybe fill the spokes with wool. You even recall a rumor from Alexandria that Greek inventors once used hollow reeds to muffle sound in musical instruments. Could reeds work for a wheel? Probably not, but your mind hums with possibilities. Outside, the first carts of the day begin to roll by. You hear merchants calling, dogs barking, sandals slapping stone. The entire world wakes up far too early. You sip watered wine, half wishing for coffee, and start hammering an axle pin in rhythm with the noise, a futile protest against the city's chaos. Your neighbor, old Marcus, pokes his head in. "Still at it, dreamer?" he grumbles. His toga is half-tied, his hair a rebellion of gray tufts. "You'll never silence Rome. The gods tried, and they failed."
You shrug, grinning. Maybe they didn't use enough goat fat. Marcus snorts and disappears, muttering something about madness being contagious. You return to your work, tapping the edge of a wheel rim with a stick. It sings a sharp metallic note, far too bright. You want dullness, softness, something that makes sound disappear into the air. You imagine a chariot gliding past the forum, wheels whispering instead of screeching, horses padding like ghosts. The image is beautiful enough to make you forget your exhaustion. Later that morning, you venture into the marketplace, scanning the stalls for materials. Traders shout over each other, "Fresh olives! Imported garum! Best goat hide in the empire!" And you flinch with every yell. Maybe, you think, you're not just an inventor. Maybe you're the only sane man left. A blacksmith named Lucius waves you over. He's half blind from years of staring at molten metal, but still sharp-tongued. "You again," he says. "Let me guess. Still chasing silence?" You nod. "I think I'm close." He laughs so hard his apron shakes. "You'll get there when the Senate stops arguing." But he does sell you a small jar of something interesting. Thick, black, and sticky. Tar mixed with olive oil, he explains. Softens the creak on door hinges. Might work for your madness, too.
Back in your workshop, you spread the mixture along the axle of a test wheel. The smell hits first, smoky and sweet, like burnt figs. You spin the wheel experimentally. It moves smoother, quieter. The faintest glimmer of hope flickers in your chest. You imagine showing this to the emperor himself. "Caesar, behold, the gift of silence." Still, you know this is only the beginning. The city's noise isn't just mechanical, it's cultural. Romans thrive on sound, gossip, debate, hammering, cheering, singing. Even the fountains gurgle like they're talking about politics. But you can't help dreaming of a night where the only sound is the soft breeze off the Tiber and the distant hoot of an owl. As the sun sets again, you lie on your cot, hands black with tar, eyes gritty with exhaustion. Outside, a chariot rumbles by, loud enough to shake the shutters. You stare at the ceiling, smile faintly, and whisper to no one in particular, "We'll see who's louder tomorrow." Somewhere beyond your window, a bell tolls. It's not your invention yet, but it's a promise.
The morning comes far too soon, sliding into your window with a golden smear of light. You blink awake to the familiar percussion of Rome, sandals slapping, carts clattering, vendors already hollering about figs that allegedly came straight from Capua. You sit up, rubbing your face, wondering if anyone in this city has ever experienced true silence. You step outside, and the noise greets you like an old friend who never leaves. The Eternal City, they call it, and you suppose the name fits, not because of its glory, but because it simply refuses to shut up. From your street near the Aventine Hill, you can hear half of Rome breathing at once. There's the metallic screech of carts on stone, the rhythmic creak of ox cart harnesses, and somewhere in the distance, a lute player valiantly trying to compete with chaos. You wander toward the main road, sandals scraping dust from the stones polished by centuries of footsteps. Every inch of the city hums. Bakers slap dough onto hot stones, blacksmiths hammer out sparks like morning stars, and a woman upstairs is berating her husband for buying bad garum. It's strangely beautiful in its madness, a living machine powered by people instead of gears. But for someone trying to invent quiet, it's also torture. You pause beside the fountain of mercury, watching water trickle over a marble basin. It's the only truly soothing sound in the city, a low, steady murmur that almost drowns out the street. Almost. You think, what if wheels could sound like that? Not silent, just soft, a hush instead of a screech.
The thought lingers as you cross the forum. Marble columns rise like frozen thunderclaps. Statues glint in the sun, and the smell of roasting chestnuts fills the air. Rome feels eternal, unstoppable, and astonishingly loud. You pass a group of scribes shouting over each other about Cicero's latest speech. One of them waves his stylus at you. "You, what do you think of Cicero's diction?" You raise an eyebrow. "I think it keeps me awake at night." They laugh, assuming it's a joke, but it's not. Even words here are noisy. Historians still argue whether the Romans truly banned wagons during daylight to reduce congestion, or simply to give senators a clear road to strut on. Either way, the result is the same. All that noise gets pushed into the night. And that, you realize, is your personal curse. When the city finally rests, you lie awake, listening to an orchestra of wheels echoing through narrow alleys, each one hitting a different note of torment. You remember one particularly sleepless night when a wagon loaded with M4I rolled past your window. Each jar clinked, clanged, and sang its own off-key aria. You threw a sandal at the shutters in protest, only to have it bounce back and hit you in the forehead. Your neighbors heard that too, of course. Someone shouted, "Stop inventing up there!"
Now, in daylight, you study the cobblestones more closely. They're uneven, cracked, and ancient. You crouch to run your fingers along the grooves. The city itself is the problem. Rough, worn, loud. Even the stones have voices, whispering with each wheel that passes. You can almost hear them gossiping about your absurd quest. A merchant pauses beside you, balancing baskets of fruit. "You're counting rocks or losing your mind?" he asks. "Bit of both," you reply, trying to figure out how to make them quieter. He laughs. "Then you'll have to start by silencing Rome itself." You grin. "Give me a week." He walks off, shaking his head, muttering something about philosophers and madness. Later, you duck into a small tavern, one of those dim, smoky places where the sound of dice hitting the table blends with the low hum of gossip. You take a seat, order watered wine, and pull a scrap of parchment from your sleeve. You sketch an idea, a wheel rim lined with layers, wood, leather, and something softer between. Maybe cloth soaked in oil. The thought makes you oddly proud, a chariot that glides instead of groans. A tavern singer starts up in the corner, plucking at a lyre. The melody rises above the chatter, and for a brief moment you realize something. Noise can be tolerable, even beautiful, when it's deliberate. It's the accidental noises, the chaos, the rattle, the endless clack, clack, clack that drive you mad.
The singer's tune shifts into a Roman love ballad, tragically off-key. You sigh. So much for serenity. By evening, you return to your workshop, ears ringing from the day. The sunset paints the city gold and crimson, and the Tiber glimmers like molten glass. The sound of wheels carries up the hill, faint but ever-present, a metallic lullaby you can't escape. You stand at your bench, staring at your half-built chariot frame. It looks more like a broken wine rack than a vehicle, but to you, it's potential incarnate. You think of the philosophers again. One of them, Seneca, maybe, said that true peace comes from mastering the noise within. You prefer to master the noise without. You dip your brush into the tar-olive mixture from Lucius and paint another wheel rim. The scent fills the air, heavy and earthy. Somewhere nearby, a lark chirps. You smile faintly. Maybe there's hope yet. The street begins to quiet as night falls. Candles flicker in windows, and the air cools. You listen carefully. The low creak of a gate, the murmur of a couple walking home, the distant rumble of another chariot. You breathe out through your nose, already planning how to make tomorrow quieter. For now, though, you sit back and close your eyes, imagining a future Rome where wheels glide like silk and even the gods sleep through the night.
Morning again. You wake to the same symphony, carts clattering, merchants bellowing, the faint rhythmic squeak of a pulley hauling water from a well. But this time, there's something different in the air. A scroll-bearer is jogging through the streets, shouting a decree from the emperor himself. You pause mid-yawn to listen. "By order of Caesar," the messenger cries, Any cart or wagon operating after sunset must reduce disturbance to the peace of Rome. You nearly spill your breakfast porridge. That, you think, is divine confirmation. The emperor himself has joined your crusade against noise. It's not just you anymore. The entire city has a new law demanding quieter wheels. You throw on your tunic, grab your half-dried wheel prototype, and march straight to the forum like a man possessed. The city is in a flurry. Merchants argue about what reduced disturbance even means, while charioteers loudly proclaim that quiet wheels are un-Roman. You overhear one say, "A good cart should roar like Jupiter's thunder," and you can't help muttering, "Then may he sleep through it." By midday, you find yourself before a small group of magistrates gathered in the basilica. They're taking complaints, reading scrolls, pretending to look important. You clear your throat. "Citizens of Rome," you begin, "I bring a solution to our nocturnal misery."
A humble inventor, you reply, but one with a gift for silence. They exchange glances. One gestures for you to continue, mostly because they're bored. You lift your wheel, a patchwork of olive wood, goat hide, and tar. This, you announce, is the world's first quiet chariot wheel. They lean forward, intrigued despite themselves. You spin it gently, letting the sunlight catch on its oiled surface. It turns with a faint, smooth whisper. No screech, no rattle. For a heartbeat, the room feels hushed, almost reverent. Then someone sneezes, and the spell breaks. A scribe coughs. "Impressive," he says, "but will it survive a Roman street?" You grin. Only one way to find out. And so begins your first official demonstration. You haul the chariot frame out to the courtyard, attach the new wheels, and prepare to push it across the stones. A small crowd gathers. Children, vendors, a suspicious-looking mule. The magistrates watch with arms crossed, skeptical. You give the wheel a nudge. It rolls forward, smooth, quiet, almost ghost-like. The crowd murmurs. A woman gasps. You can feel pride bloom in your chest like sunrise.
Then, halfway down the path, the tar softens under the heat. The wheel wobbles, groans, and emits a sound like a dying goose. The crowd bursts into laughter. You bow anyway, trying to mask your embarrassment. "A temporary setback," you declare. "Silence takes patience." Historians still argue whether such demonstrations ever took place. Some claim Rome's engineers were too practical to waste time on quiet wheels. Others insist there must have been dreamers like you, because how else did rubberized transport eventually evolve? Either way, your failure doesn't stop you. If anything, it lights a fire under your sandals. You spend the next few days experimenting. You borrow ideas from shipbuilders who use tar-soaked hemp to seal seams. You mix new compounds, wax, resin, even fish oil, though that one leaves the workshop smelling like disappointment. You take notes obsessively, filling scrolls with diagrams and scribbles. One entry reads, "If silence were easy, the gods would have invented it first." In between tests, you wander through the city listening. You hear how sound behaves, how it echoes between buildings, how it softens under awnings, how footsteps vanish when the sand between cobblestones shifts. You begin to notice beauty in it all. Even the chaos has rhythm.
One night, as you sit by the Tiber, watching lanterns drift on the water, you wonder if maybe you're chasing something impossible. Maybe Rome isn't meant to be quiet. Maybe noise is its heartbeat. Then another chariot screeches past, nearly launching its driver into the river, and you're inspired all over again. You trudge home, half amused, half determined. Along the way, you pass a group of poets reciting verses under torchlight. One shouts,
Rome will echo forever.
You mutter under your breath, "Not if I can help it." Back in your workshop, the night hums with crickets and the faint hiss of the forge cooling down. You light an oil lamp and stare at your latest wheel. You can almost see perfection hovering there, quiet, elegant, possible. You remember the emperor's decree and smile. Even if you fail, you've caught the attention of Caesar himself, or at least his sleepless staff. Maybe tomorrow you'll petition for official funding, or maybe you'll just get fined for violating street regulations again. Either way, the city won't silence you. Not yet. You place your hand on the smooth curve of the wheel, whisper a silent promise to the gods of invention, and blow out the lamp. Outside, the first chariot of the night rattles by, hitting every cobblestone like a drum roll, as if the city itself is challenging you to try again. You grin into the darkness. Challenge accepted.
You wake up to the smell of burnt olive oil and metal dust. Your workshop looks like a battlefield. Half-melted jars of tar, shavings of wood, scraps of parchment, and one very confused cat sitting on top of your blueprints. You sigh. The quiet chariot will not invent itself, apparently. Today, you decide, you'll focus on materials. Rome has everything: shipwrights, potters, metal workers, even perfume merchants. Somewhere among them, someone must know the secret to silence. You start with the blacksmith Lucius again, partly because he owes you a favor, and partly because his forge is the loudest place in the district, an excellent testing ground for irony. Lucius wipes sweat from his brow when you arrive. "Back for more goat fat?" he asks. "Something better," you reply. "I need the quietest metal in Rome." He snorts. "Quiet metal? That's like asking for polite senators." You grin. "Humor me." He rummages through his scrap pile, pulling out a dull bronze bar. "This one's softer, bends easy, doesn't ring much." You tap it experimentally. The sound is low and muted, like a tired drum. Promising. You buy it with a few coins and a half-loaf of bread, which counts as currency in Lucius's forge. Next, you head to the tanner's quarter. The air is thick with the smell of animal hides and vinegar. A woman named Sabina, who has run her workshop since before you could walk, greets you with her usual scowl. "Back again, wheel dreamer?" "Just need leather that doesn't squeak," you say. She raises an eyebrow. "Nothing in Rome doesn't squeak. Even senators squeak when you cut their pay." You laugh, but she hands you a strip of treated calfskin anyway. Boiled in olive oil and wine. Flexible, strong, and quieter than most marriages. You add it to your growing collection of odd materials: tar, bronze, leather, and a small pouch of powdered pumice you grabbed from a bathhouse attendant who swore it softens anything. Historians still argue whether Romans used pumice in engineering or just in beauty routines. You, however, are too desperate to care. Back at the workshop, you lay everything out like a feast: metal, hide, wood, and a little bowl of goat fat gleaming in the sun. The cat eyes it suspiciously. Your plan is simple. Line the inner rim of the wheel with bronze, coat it with tar mixed with oil, and wrap the outer edge in soft leather. A chariot shoe, you think proudly. You smear, hammer, and bind for hours, pausing only when Lucius drops by to mock you. "Still chasing silence?" he asks. Closer than ever. He leans in, squints at your wheel. Looks more like a pastry than a chariot part. You chuckle. Then it's a pastry that won't wake the city.
He grunts approvingly and wanders off. By dusk, your hands are slick with grease, but your creation gleams. You lift it, spin it on its axle, and, by Jupiter, it moves, almost soundlessly. A small victory, but a sweet one. You grin, feeling absurdly proud. To test it properly,
You attach the wheel to your chariot frame and push it outside. The street glows orange from torchlight. You give it a shove. It rolls smooth and whisper quiet over the first few feet. Then, as if mocking you, it catches a pebble and emits a pitiful squee. You groan. Tar, why have you betrayed me? The cat meows, unsympathetic. Still, you're not discouraged. You take notes, adjusting the ratios. Less oil, more pumice, thicker hide. You're deep in thought when Marcus, your neighbor, wanders over. He's holding a cup of wine and wearing the weary expression of someone who's lived too long beside a genius. Does it work yet? Almost. He peers at the wheel. It looks heavy. You nod. Quiet has a price.
He sips his wine. And sanity, apparently. You both laugh. For a moment it feels good to be ridiculous. You realize that's part of the magic. The city needs its dreamers, even the impractical ones. Later that night, as you lie in bed, your hands still smell of resin and oil. You stare at the ceiling, thinking about how every invention starts as nonsense. The aqueducts, the roads, even the first sandals must have seemed foolish once. Outside, a few chariots rattle by, their drivers shouting drunkenly. You imagine a future where your design silences them all, where the city glides through the night in near peace, broken only by laughter and wind. You smile, half asleep. Maybe someday, long after you're gone, someone will make it real. But not tonight. Tonight, you dream of wheels spinning like whispers, carrying Rome into the quiet future you can almost hear.
You're jolted awake by the unmistakable sound of disaster. A loud crack, followed by the slow, tragic wobble of something rolling where it shouldn't. You sit up, squinting. There it is, your precious quiet wheel, now very much not attached to the chariot, leaning pitifully against the doorway like a drunk gladiator after a bad night at the Colosseum. Fantastic, you mutter, dragging yourself up. The cat blinks at you, unimpressed. Don't look at me like that. Genius takes failure. You kneel, inspecting the damage. The bronze rim is cracked clean through, the leather frayed, and the tar has gone tacky overnight. The culprit? Humidity. Roman air can't decide if it wants to be desert dry or swamp wet, and your invention, apparently, took offense at both. Still, this is how real inventors learn. Trial, error, and the occasional burnt eyebrow. You sweep the scraps aside and pour yourself a cup of watered wine, standard Roman breakfast for the emotionally wounded. As you sip, you remember something from your visit to the Library of Alexandria. Well, a scroll about it anyway. Some Alexandrian craftsman had once claimed that wrapping wheel hubs in papyrus sheets soaked in honey reduced friction. Historians still argue whether that story was true or the result of too much honey wine, but it sparks an idea.
You grab a few sheets of old parchment, unpaid tax notices, naturally, and coat them with olive oil and beeswax. You wrap them tight around a wheel core, humming tunelessly. The cat watches as though you're performing forbidden magic. When the sun climbs high, you roll the wheel outside again. You give it a push across the courtyard stones. This time, silence, or at least relative silence. More of a muffled hum than a squeal. Your heart races. You push harder, chasing it down the slope toward the main road. The wheel rolls smooth for a good 15 paces before wobbling, catching the edge of a loose stone, and flipping majestically into a merchant's cart full of fish. There's a moment of pure stillness, the kind only possible before someone starts screaming. Then the fishmonger erupts. "By Neptune's beard, my mullets!" You wince, rushing to help. "I'll pay for it." "With what? More noise?" he snaps. You retrieve the wheel, dripping and smelling like Poseidon's laundry, and trudge home. Not your finest hour.
Later, Marcus stops by again, holding 2 cups of wine and grinning like he's been waiting all morning for this story. "So, how quiet's the wheel now?" "You quieter than your jokes," you mutter. He laughs, hands you the wine. "You know, you could just move to the countryside. No noise there." "But no audience either," you reply. "What's the point of a quiet chariot if no one hears it?"
He raises an eyebrow. That's the point, isn't it? That no one hears it. Touché. You can't help but think he's right. Maybe this isn't about applause. Maybe it's about control over the chaos, over the clamor of life in the empire. The roads, the soldiers, the hammers, the endless voices of Rome. Maybe you just want one thing that obeys silence. That night you sketch again. You imagine chariots with padded hubs, muffled reins, soft leather footrests. You doodle until the candle burns low, filling the parchment with loops and lines like constellations. Somewhere between exhaustion and revelation, you realize your real mistake. Wait, you've been building like a blacksmith, not like a whisper. The next morning, you visit the Carpenters' Guild. The foreman, old Publius, eyes your blueprints and scratches his beard. Lightweight, huh? We used something similar once for racing chariots. Used ash wood. Flexible, strong, but it sings if you hit it wrong. Then we teach it to sing softly, you reply. Publius grins. You're mad. I like it. Together you craft a new frame. Ashwood ribs, bronze nails only where necessary, a thin layer of goat fat and pumice to cushion the wheel spokes. The smell is interesting, like burnt cheese left on a temple altar, but the design feels right. By sundown, the test run awaits. You set the chariot at the top of the hill, heart thudding. Marcus shows up again, of course. If this explodes, I want your cat.
Noted. You climb aboard, grip the reins, and give the wheels a gentle nudge. They roll, soft as sighs. The chariot glides, smooth over the stones, barely whispering. You grin, adrenaline singing in your veins. The wind in your hair feels like applause. Then, halfway down the hill, one of the bronze nails snaps. The left wheel lurches, and suddenly you're experiencing the ancient Roman version of turbulence. You swerve, nearly hit a fruit cart, and end up in a fountain. Again. The cat watches from the window, unimpressed. Soaked but laughing, you climb out, triumphant in your own absurd way. Because even failure, when it's this close to success, feels like a kind of victory. You've built something new, and Rome, noisy and chaotic as ever, is listening. As you drag the broken chariot home, you can't help but smile. Tomorrow, you'll fix the nail. Tomorrow, you'll make it glide just a little smoother. Because you're certain of one thing now. Silence isn't impossible. It's just very, very stubborn.
By morning, your courtyard smells like sawdust, wine, and determination, the unofficial scent of Roman invention. The sun filters through the grapevines overhead, tracing thin gold lines across your latest sketches. You've redrawn the wheel again, and this time you're thinking in layers. Light ashwood inside, goat leather lining outside, and a thin ring of bronze at the edge. You tap the parchment and murmur to yourself, "If silence won't come naturally, I'll build it piece by piece." Your neighbor Marcus wanders in again, biting an apple and looking far too relaxed for a man who does no work before noon. "You're at it again," he says, peering over your shoulder. "You ever think maybe the gods just like noise? Thunder, wars, applause. Maybe silence offends them?" You smirk. "Then they can lodge a complaint in writing." He chuckles and tosses you the apple core, which you use to prop up one of your notes. Improvised engineering, the Roman way.
When you return to the workshop, you notice something peculiar. The cat is sleeping on a stack of leather strips, and under her paw, one piece has creased perfectly around a small bronze ring. You lift it gently, running your thumb over the shape. It fits the wheel hub like a glove. Maybe that's the answer: tension and give, not brute pressure. By midday, you're experimenting again. You fit a narrow ring of polished bronze inside a sheath of leather soaked in olive oil. It's tedious, fiddly work, and you mutter creative curses in Latin as you go. By the time you finish, your hands gleam with oil and your patience hangs by a thread. But when you set the wheel down and push, it glides, softly, no screech, no clatter, just the faintest whisper of movement, like a mouse crossing parchment. You freeze, listening. A pigeon coos on the roof. Somewhere, a blacksmith's hammer echoes faintly. But your wheel? Silent. You grin. Got you, you noisy beast. Historians still argue whether ancient Romans truly experimented with sound reduction, but in this little courtyard, centuries before science would name it acoustics, you've just invented it through sheer stubbornness and insomnia. Marcus returns just as you're adjusting the axle. You look far too pleased with yourself, he says. I've done it, I whisper. He raises an eyebrow. Really? You motion him over. Push it. He shrugs and gives the wheel a shove. It rolls silently across the courtyard, tapping gently against a jar. Marcus's eyes widen. By the gods! I told you. He pauses. You realize if this actually works, you'll ruin half the blacksmith's business in Rome. You wave the idea away. They'll survive. Someone's got to make the silence affordable.
Later that evening, you take your nearly finished chariot frame out for a test on the Appian Way, just beyond the city walls, where the stones are smoother. The fading light paints everything gold, and the air smells of pine resin and distant campfires. You tighten the reins, breathe deep, and give the wheels a tentative roll. The chariot glides forward with almost supernatural grace. For a moment, you hear only the wind in your tunic and the steady beat of your heart. The horses flick their ears back, surprised by the quiet. You can't help smiling. You whisper, "Finally!" Then, from behind you, a group of curious children burst into applause. You turn. They've been watching, wide-eyed. One boy shouts, "Do it again!" You sigh, mock exasperated. You're supposed to not hear it. But they're delighted anyway. One girl even declares, "You've built a ghost chariot." You ride back slowly, the quiet of the road broken only by the faint rhythm of hooves. A legion patrol passes, their armor clinking like wind chimes. The centurion stares at your contraption. "Why's it so quiet?" he asks. You shrug. "Divine intervention." He grunts. "Wish we had that during night marches." And with that, you realize something important. Your invention might have a future beyond curiosity. Military scouts, messengers, even priests, all could use a chariot that doesn't wake the whole empire. Back home, as the moon climbs high, you jot down a few ideas. "Marketable silence," you write, underlining it twice. The cat meows, unimpressed. You grin, rubbing her ears. "Don't worry, you'll get royalties."
You lean back, the cool marble against your spine. For the first time in weeks, the city's usual din fades into background texture. Distant carts, cicadas, laughter from a nearby tavern. You close your eyes and realize that silence isn't just something you build, it's something you learn to notice. Tomorrow, you'll start refining the bearings. Maybe wrap the axle in linen soaked in wax. Or maybe you'll test different woods. Olive? Beech? The possibilities buzz quietly in your mind. For now, though, you sit in the warm Roman night, half drunk on success and wine, and whisper to yourself, "Rome may be loud, but I'll make her listen. And somewhere, out in the dark, a nightingale sings softly, as if in applause.
You wake before dawn this time, not because of failure or frustration, but because you can't stop thinking. The idea of marketable silence keeps looping in your head like a catchy Roman tavern tune. You lie there for a moment, listening to the city slowly stir awake, the clatter of pots, the bark of dogs, the echo of a distant blacksmith's hammer. Rome never really sleeps. It just pauses for breath. And maybe, you think, that's why people crave quiet so much. By the time the sun is up, you've already washed, eaten a fig, and strapped on your work belt. You've got a plan. The bearings are next. Last night's success proved the wheel design worked. Now it's about the connection, the subtle art of keeping motion smooth but soundless. You grab a spool of linen from the shelf, tear off a strip, and coat it in a mixture of wax and olive oil. The texture is satisfying, tacky, pliant, like the promise of something that shouldn't work, but just might. You wrap it carefully around the axle, humming tunelessly to yourself. As you slide the wheel back on, you can almost feel it breathe, a soft resistance, like the wheel itself is sighing into place. You push it gently. It rolls, and the silence deepens. It's not just quiet. It's serene, a hush that feels alive. "By Jupiter's sandals," you whisper. "It's perfect." The cat, unimpressed as ever, yawns loudly in response. You decide to test the full chariot again, this time outside the city gate, where the stones are flat and wide. The early morning mist hovers low over the road, and the dew paints your sandals silver. A merchant wagon trundles by, rattling and squeaking like an orchestra of rust, and you can't help smirking. "Amateurs," you mutter.
You set your chariot at the top of a gentle slope. Take a breath and let it roll. No screech, no chatter, just wind. The horses trot easily, their hooves soft against the earth. The reins hum in your hands, and for a moment you imagine the whole empire has gone still just to listen. Historians still debate whether any Roman actually attempted to engineer soundless transport, but if they did, it probably felt exactly like this, a stolen moment of calm inside the noisiest civilization on Earth. As you ride, you start noticing details you'd never heard before. The whisper of reeds near the Tiber, the faint rhythm of your own heartbeat, the flicker of a bird's wings above. Without noise, the world expands. You pass a farmer hauling amphorae who stares as you glide silently by. "Is that floating?" he murmurs. You grin. "Just smooth engineering, friend." He nods reverently, as though you're some sort of magician. And honestly, for a moment, you feel like one. By the time you return home, you're practically vibrating with pride. Marcus shows up, of course, carrying what looks suspiciously like a bottle of celebratory wine. "I heard rumors," he says, leaning in the doorway. "Someone built a ghost chariot." I groan. "Already? You should hear what the baker said. Apparently, you sold your soul to Vulcan in exchange for quiet wheels." You grin. "If that's true, I'm charging rent."
He pours 2 cups of wine and raises one. "Two impossible ideas." You clink his cup. "And stubborn inventors." The wine burns pleasantly down your throat, and you can't help laughing. "You know what the best part is?" you say. "I did all this just so I could sleep." Marcus snorts. "And yet you haven't slept in a week." Fair point. As evening falls, you find yourself walking through the forum, thinking of who might care about a quiet chariot. Messengers, maybe? Priests performing night rituals? Possibly. Senators sneaking out past curfew? Definitely. You sketch as you walk, small diagrams on scraps of parchment, and nearly bump into a pair of philosophers arguing about whether silence is the absence of sound or simply the absence of attention. You almost stop to join in, but then one of them says, "Silence cannot be built." You can't help yourself. "Actually," you interrupt, "it can." They blink. "Oh? And you are?" You grin. "Someone who's about to prove it." That night, you work by lamplight. You add a second layer to the wheel lining, linen mixed with powdered pumice. The result feels smoother, lighter, even cleaner somehow. You test it again on the stone floor. The wheel spins so silently, you can hear your own breath echoing off the walls. "Perfect," you whisper.
But when you lean closer, you notice something strange. The wheel hums faintly, not from friction, but from the air itself, a low melodic resonance. It's beautiful in a strange, almost musical way. Maybe silence isn't about erasing sound. Maybe it's about shaping it. You note that down. Controlled resonance, the music of motion. Marcus pops his head in again, holding a scroll. "Letters from your brother," he says. "He heard about your invention." "Already?" Marcus shrugs. "Rome travels faster than your chariot, apparently." You unroll the scroll. Your brother, stationed near Gaul, writes that the army could use something like this. Stealth vehicles for messengers, supply runners, even scouts. He adds, "If you can make it sturdy enough for a muddy field, you'll be richer than Crassus." You grin. Challenge accepted. Marcus sighs. "I was afraid you'd say that." That night, the stars burn bright above the rooftops. You sit back in your chair, the air cool on your skin, and you feel something rare in Rome: peace. You whisper to the sky, "Quiet chariot, loud dreams," and the wind, soft as silk, seems to whisper back.
By sunrise, your courtyard has transformed into something between a workshop and a battlefield. Shavings of wood litter the ground like fallen leaves, and the faint scent of beeswax clings to everything: your tunic, your tools, even the cat who's given up protesting and now naps atop a pile of blueprints. You stand there, hands on hips, staring at the latest version of your quiet chariot. It looks elegant, actually, streamlined. The wheels gleam faintly in the morning light, the bronze bands polished to a subtle glow. You give one a cautious spin, smooth as silk, just a faint murmur like distant surf. You smile. Progress. Still, the problem remains: durability. Rome's roads are not forgiving. Smooth marble in the Forum gives way to jagged cobbles and potholes that could swallow a senator whole. You can make the wheels whisper, but if they crumble after one trip to the baths, it's all for nothing. You sigh and sit on the workbench. Maybe it's time to think like an engineer and a poet. Rome's strength wasn't in brute force alone. It was in balance, in compromise. Roads that drained water perfectly, bridges that flexed without falling. Maybe silence, too, has to bend a little. As you ponder, Marcus wanders in carrying a loaf of bread and 2 cups of something that smells suspiciously like yesterday's wine. "You look philosophical," he says.
"I'm contemplating the elasticity of silence." He stares at you. "You need more sleep." You tear a piece of bread. "No, I need better roads." Marcus grins. "You're going to start paving the empire now?" You shrug. "Maybe." He laughs, but you're only half joking. Because as you test the wheels again, you realize that silence depends as much on the road as on the wheel. The Appian Way may be the pride of Rome, but it's not exactly whisper-friendly. The joints between stones clack under pressure, echoing like tiny thunderclaps. You start to wonder, could the same principle that silenced the wheel also soften the road? You grab a handful of crushed pumice and sprinkle it between the paving stones. It's ridiculous, sure, but so was the quiet wheel once. You roll the chariot again. The sound changes, softer, cushioned. Not perfect, but promising. Historians still argue whether ancient Romans ever experimented with layered roads or sound-dampening materials. But as you watch the dust settle, you can almost see the idea forming centuries before its time. Marcus watches you, eyebrows raised. So now you're inventing quiet roads? You grin. Why stop at the wheel? He shakes his head, muttering something about the madness of visionaries.
Later, you take the chariot out beyond the city, past the villas and vineyards, to a stretch of unpaved dirt road. The horizon glows soft pink, and the early mist wraps around your legs. You step into the chariot and release the brake. The wheels turn silently. The earth beneath them absorbs the sound like a soft sigh. It's perfect for about 15 seconds. Then you hit a rut and almost catapult yourself into a bush. You land on your back, staring at the sky, the wind knocked out of you. Somewhere nearby, a lark sings cheerfully, which feels unnecessarily smug. You can't help laughing. All right, all right. Noted. Dirt has opinions. When you return home, bruised but triumphant, you find a small crowd gathered outside your gate. Word travels fast in Rome, and the rumor mill has apparently decided you're working on the emperor's new weapon. A young messenger approaches nervously. "Sir, are you the man making the ghost cart?" You sigh. "It depends. Is that what they're calling it now?" He nods. "The governor of Campania heard about it. He's curious. He says if you can make it silent and strong, he'll buy 6. You blink. 6? The boy nods eagerly. "For night deliveries, important documents. He says the clatter of normal carts gives everything away."
You exchange a look with Marcus. "Well," your friend says slowly, "there's your market." You grin, heart thudding. "Then we'll make them better than ever." That night, you and Marcus work by torchlight. You reinforce the axle with a hollow bronze core, lighter but strong. You wrap the rims in oiled felt and secure the spokes with thin strips of boiled leather. The sound, when you roll it, is barely a breath. "Listen," you whisper. Marcus leans closer. "I don't hear anything." "Exactly." The cat stretches lazily, tail flicking, unimpressed as always. As you sit back exhausted but exhilarated, you find yourself wondering. Maybe the quiet chariot isn't just about peace or sleep or curiosity. Maybe it's about rebellion. Against the noise, against the pace of Rome, against the idea that progress must always shout to be heard. You pour 2 cups of wine and hand one to Marcus. "To silence," you toast. He grins. "To you, the mad Roman who made the world hush for a second." You smile, leaning back against the wall. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, you can still hear the city breathing, hammers, wheels, voices, laughter. But for once, it doesn't drown you out. It just fades gently, like waves rolling backward into the sea. And for a few quiet minutes under the Roman moon, you almost forget you ever needed sleep. Because in this hush you've built, your thoughts are lighter, your hands steady, and for the first time in weeks, the silence feels complete.
By the next morning, you're already halfway to becoming a local legend. Word has spread from your tiny workshop all the way to the Palatine Hill that a certain inventor has created a silent chariot fit for the gods. Which is funny, because the gods would almost certainly prefer thunder and lightning to muffled wheels. Still, the whispers make their way to the right ears. A letter arrives, sealed with wax, bearing the faint impression of a laurel. Marcus finds it first and waves it at you like it's a golden ticket. "Guess who wants to see your invention?" he says, eyes wide. You snatch it from him. The handwriting is elegant, formal, the kind of script that belongs to someone with too many slaves and not enough patience. It reads, "The Senator Lucius Petronius Valens requests a demonstration of your remarkable silent chariot, said to glide as though borne by spirits. Present yourself at his villa tomorrow at dawn." You read it twice, then you read it aloud, slowly, savoring every pompous syllable. Marcus grins. "Congratulations! You're officially respectable." You groan, "Which means it's only a matter of time before I'm in trouble." He shrugs, "Then enjoy the day before the trouble begins." That evening, you polish every bronze fitting until the chariot gleams like sunlight on the Tiber. You run your fingers over the wheels, feeling the smooth blend of leather and wood, the whisper-soft resistance of waxed linen bearings. This isn't just a machine anymore, it's a statement, a defiance of everything noisy and restless about Rome.
You hardly sleep. By dawn, you're standing in the courtyard of Valens' villa, the air thick with the scent of pine and incense. The senator himself arrives, wrapped in a pristine toga and wearing the faint, polite smile of a man who expects to be impressed but won't admit it. "Ah," he says, inspecting you as though you're part of the exhibit. "The inventor." You bow slightly. "At your service, Senator." "And this," he gestures to the chariot, "is the ghost cart?" You wince. "That's, one name for it, yes." He circles it slowly, touching nothing, his sandals whispering across the marble floor. "They say it moves without sound?" You nod. "That's the idea." He motions. "Then show me." You take a deep breath, tighten the reins, and give the horses a gentle flick. The chariot rolls forward, gliding across the courtyard stones as if the earth itself were holding its breath. Not a squeak, not a rattle. The only sound is the faint sigh of air against the wheels. The senator raises his eyebrows, impressed despite himself. "Remarkable!" You grin. "Told you." He leans closer. "How?" You hesitate. "Trade secrets, Senator." He chuckles. "Clever. You'll go far with that attitude." Then he gestures for one of his servants to fetch something. A small chest of coins, heavy enough to make the wood groan when it's set down. "Payment," he says, "if you can build me 2 more by the end of the month."
You blink. 2? Of course, he says, as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. The Emperor enjoys novelty, and so do I. You bow again, trying to hide your grin. Consider it done. Marcus is waiting outside the villa when you return, leaning against the gate with a smug look that says, "I told you so," before he even opens his mouth. "Well?" he asks. "He wants 2, you reply. Marcus whistles. "You're either about to be rich or very tired." You laugh. Both, probably. Back at your workshop, you get to work immediately. The cat watches as you unroll fresh sheets of parchment and start sketching modifications. Stronger rims, reinforced hubs, maybe even decorative flourishes. The senator will expect luxury, but you want to keep the soul of the design,
that elusive, fragile silence. As you carve and polish, the rhythmic sound of your tools fills the air. It's strange. You've spent weeks trying to eliminate noise, but now the soft scrape of wood and the clink of bronze feel comforting, like a heartbeat. By late afternoon, the sun hangs low and orange over the rooftops. Marcus drops by with food, as usual. "So," he says, chewing, "you're making chariots for senators now? What happens when the emperor wants one?"
You smirk, and I start charging by the decibel. He laughs so hard he nearly drops his bread. As night falls, you step outside to clear your head. Rome glows faintly in the distance, torches flickering like stars on earth. The city hums, not just with sound, but with life, energy, ambition. For the first time, you feel in rhythm with it rather than against it. You whisper to the dark, maybe silence isn't about escape. Maybe it's about balance. Historians still argue whether any Roman inventor achieved such refinement in wheelcraft, but if they did, they must have known this feeling, the harmony between the world's noise and your own quiet creation. When you finally go inside, Marcus has fallen asleep at your workbench, a cup of wine still in his hand. The cat curls beside him. You smile and pull a blanket over them both. Then, softly, you return to your sketches, the quiet of your little workshop deeper than any temple prayer. Tomorrow you'll begin again, because that's what inventors do. You chase silence through the chaos until it lets you catch it, just for a moment. And in Rome, that's a miracle.
The morning haze rolls off the Tiber like steam from a simmering pot as you prepare for what might be your busiest month yet. 2 more silent chariots. That's what the senator demanded. 2 machines that can glide over marble and gravel alike without a whisper. Easy to promise when your first one worked perfectly, harder to deliver twice when every noble in Rome suddenly wants to watch you do it. Marcus arrives before dawn, carrying bread and the news. "Word spreading," he says, tossing you half the loaf. "Some poet in the forum's already calling you the man who made silence gallop." You laugh through a mouthful of bread. "That sounds like a terrible metaphor." He shrugs. "Welcome to fame." By mid-morning, your small courtyard is buzzing with curiosity. Neighbors lean over the walls. A couple of apprentices from a rival workshop pretend to stroll by for the 5th time. Even a stray chicken seems to pause near the doorway, as if expecting to witness history. You can feel their eyes as you hammer, file, and test. The process itself becomes a kind of meditation. Every stroke, every adjustment feels precise, almost sacred. The first chariot was born of obsession. These next 2 must be born of mastery. You no longer chase silence, you shape it, coaxing it out of wood and metal like a musician tuning his last string before a performance. Remind me why you didn't just make noisy ones like everyone else. You could have saved yourself a lot of sleepless nights. You grin without looking up. Because noisy chariots already exist. That earns you an exaggerated groan. Ah, the curse of originality. Historians will call this your downfall. Historians love a downfall. It makes their scrolls more dramatic.
You spend the next several days immersed in work. Your hands ache, your eyes blur, and you forget what day it is. Sometimes you sleep sitting up, dreams blending with sketches. In one dream, you're racing through an empty forum at night, the stones glowing under moonlight, your chariot floating like a ghost. Then you wake to find the cat licking your hand, as if to remind you that real life still exists. A week later, the first of the new pair is ready for testing. Marcus insists on joining. "Someone has to make sure you don't end up under it again," he says. You roll the chariot to the street, the dawn air cool and still. A few curious faces peer from windows. You take a deep breath, grab the reins, and nudge the horses forward. And once again, nothing. No creak, no grind, only the faint sigh of the breeze through the spokes. Marcus whistles low, still silent. You nod, trying not to smile too widely. Still magic. But this time, something feels slightly different. There's a new vibration, subtle like a heartbeat under the wheels. Not loud, just alive. You realize that perfection isn't the same as peace. Maybe true silence has texture. Feels smoother than before, Marcus says, running a hand along the wheel. What did you change? Everything and nothing. I think I stopped fighting the noise. I just redirected it.
Historians still argue whether ancient Roman wheelwrights ever developed shock absorption beyond raw material quality, but your design, soft leather fused with beeswax linen bearings, might have been closer than they think. Some would later claim prototypes like yours existed briefly, then vanished, swallowed by time and indifference. But for now, your secret holds. By sunset, the second chariot gleams beside the first, twin reflections of your stubbornness. You collapse onto a stool, exhausted but exhilarated. Marcus pours wine, and you clink cups over the blueprints scattered across the table. To silence, he says. To survival, you reply. A few days later, the senator returns, this time with an entourage. Slaves, advisors, even a musician carrying a lyre for no apparent reason. They watch as you present both chariots side by side, each one perfectly polished, each wheel glinting like a halo. Valens folds his arms, trying to appear unimpressed, but his eyes betray him. You've outdone yourself, he admits. You bow, as requested. He gestures to the musician. Play something. I want to see if the wheels can outrun sound itself. You blink. Wait, what? Before you can object, the lyre begins to strum a lively tune, and Valens signals for the horses to move forward. The chariots roll forward, smooth, silent, graceful, even as music ripples through the courtyard. The contrast is surreal. Notes floating above, wheels whispering below.
The crowd gasps. Someone actually applauds. And you, half laughing, half in disbelief, realize that silence can indeed perform. Later, when everyone leaves, Valens quietly hands you a pouch heavier than any payment before. You may have built more than a chariot, he says. You may have built a metaphor. You pretend to understand, but really you just want to sleep for a week. That night, under flickering lamplight, you sit outside with Marcus and the cat. The city hums beyond the walls, the distant clang of metal, laughter from taverns, and the rhythmic pulse of Roman life. You listen, smiling faintly. You know, something strange happened to me on my journey. I spent months chasing quiet, and now I think I like the noise again. You made peace with it. Maybe. Maybe silence isn't about removing sound. It's about hearing it differently. That'll be your next invention then. Perspective. You both laugh until the wine runs out and the stars blur overhead. In the distance, a chariot rumbles featly over cobblestones, one of yours, perhaps. You close your eyes, listening to its nearly invisible hum, proud of what the city will never quite notice. After all, in a world that worships thunder, being the one who invented the whisper isn't such a bad legacy.
You wake the next morning to commotion, rumors spreading faster than chariots ever could. Word has traveled beyond your neighborhood, beyond the senator's villa, even beyond the Aventine Hill. Everyone, it seems, has heard about the man who silenced Rome. It starts innocently enough. Two scholars arguing outside a bathhouse. It's impossible, one insists. Wood against stone cannot be quiet. The gods themselves would need to intervene." "Then perhaps they did," says the other, lowering his voice. "Perhaps it was magic." By mid-morning, the gossip mutates into legend. Children shout quiet wheels as they chase each other down the street. A merchant tries to sell miniature toy chariots that make no sound at all, just painted wood that rolls on air. And somewhere you overhear an older woman muttering that silence is dangerous, that the gods prefer the clatter of life. You almost laugh, almost, because that's when you receive the invitation, if one can call it that. A wax-sealed message from the Guild of Wheelwrights of Rome. Marcus reads it aloud, his tone dripping with sarcasm. The Guild requests your presence to discuss certain innovations deemed concerning to the trade. That doesn't sound ominous at all. You sigh. If they wanted to congratulate me, they'd have sent wine. By evening, you find yourself standing before a half-circle of frowning craftsmen in a dim, smoky workshop that smells of hot iron and envy. The guildmaster, a thick-armed man named Severinus, leans forward. "Your designs, we are told, have caused confusion. Some of our customers believe we are hiding secrets from them. Others demand silence where silence should not be."
You nod politely. I only wanted smoother travel, not revolution. He snorts. Revolution is what follows when one man works too quietly. The rest murmur in agreement. For a long moment, no one speaks. Then Severinus places a wooden wheel on the table between you, a replica of your own, crudely copied, but not without skill. Our apprentices found this pattern circulating. How do you explain that? You study the wheel. It's missing half the refinements. Too stiff, too shallow. But someone, somewhere, tried to imitate you. Maybe it's flattery, you say. Or maybe people just like the idea of sleeping through traffic. That doesn't earn you a laugh. Only silence. The heavy, disapproving kind. Severinus clears his throat. "You are free to build what you wish," he says slowly, "but if your designs threaten our trade, we may need to reconsider your membership." Marcus would later call this the first recorded case of creative sabotage. Historians, of course, still argue whether the guild truly forced inventors out of business or simply feared the unknown. Either way, you leave the meeting feeling like you've just been punished for dreaming too softly. That night, while you oil the axles of your chariot, you think about what Severinus said. Too quiet, he'd warned, as if silence itself were dangerous. Maybe he's right.
Because the next evening, something strange happens. You're lying in bed, eyes half open, when the city feels wrong. The usual noises, dogs barking, wheels clattering, laughter drifting from taverns, have all faded. Even the fountain outside seems to have forgotten how to gurgle. You step into the street, and the emptiness hits you. Rome has gone still. It's not that everyone's asleep. Lamps flicker in windows, people move behind curtains, but no one dares make a sound. Then you see it, your chariot, parked exactly where you left it, faintly glowing under the moonlight. For a ridiculous second, you wonder if it's absorbing sound, drinking it like water. Marcus appears at your side, wide-eyed. "Tell me you hear that," he whispers. You listen. Nothing. Just a deep, velvet quiet that feels too thick, too absolute. "It's peaceful?" you say, though it feels like lying. "Peaceful?" He looks at you as if you've gone mad. "It's like the city's holding its breath." You spend the next hour walking through the streets, half expecting someone to shout, or a dog to bark, or a cart to rattle. Nothing. Just the soft rhythm of your sandals. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. When the first rooster finally crows at dawn, you've never felt so relieved to hear something so ordinary.
By morning, people are talking again, but not about you, not exactly. They talk about the night Rome fell silent. Some say it was a sign. Others whisper that the gods punished the city for tampering with nature. And, of course, the most dramatic of all, claim that your invention trapped the city's soul. Marcus slaps the gossip sheet onto your table later that day. "Congratulations," he says, half laughing, "you're officially cursed." You glance at the headline. "Inventor steals sound from the eternal city." "Could have been worse," you murmur. "At least they spelled my name right." Still, the unease lingers. You walk through Rome that evening, listening carefully, hearing every sound as if it might vanish again. You realize how fragile noise is, how alive it makes the world feel. Historians centuries later will debate what really happened that night. A natural lull? A poetic exaggeration? Or did your chariot truly absorb vibrations like some strange mechanical sponge? No one can prove it. The only surviving account is your own, written on a fragment of wax tablet discovered centuries later, ending mid-sentence with, "And for the first time, silence frightened me." The irony, of course, is that your masterpiece worked too well.
Morning returns with sunlight so bright it makes your workshop glow like a kiln. Dust motes drift in golden spirals, and for the first time in weeks, you don't feel exhausted, just hollow. The city outside has found its voice again, vendors yelling, dogs barking, sandals slapping on stone. Rome hums as Rome should. Yet every sound feels like an echo, bouncing off the strange silence of the night before. Marcus drops by with figs and an eyebrow raised so high it could rival an aqueduct arch. "So, the city's still talking about you?" he says. "The Dilds pretending they didn't threaten you, the senators claiming credit for your genius, and the poets, oh, the poets, have decided you were trying to bottle silence." You sigh. "I build one quiet chariot, and suddenly I'm a philosopher," he says. "You should enjoy it," Marcus says with a grin. "You're famous. Well, infamous, which is basically the same thing, just with better stories." He's right, of course. Word travels. Travelers from the provinces come asking to see the silent chariot of Rome. Foreign merchants whisper about you over amphorae of wine. Even one scholar from Alexandria sends a letter wondering if your wheels rely on a vacuum of the ether. You don't bother replying. But fame, as always, comes with a price.
2 weeks later, the senator calls again. This time, his tone is sharper, less indulgent. He wants more chariots, 5 of them, ready within a month. He claims it's for a ceremonial parade, but you suspect something else. Perhaps the emperor himself has heard. You almost laugh at the absurdity. A parade of silence, Rome's noisiest event turned mute. Still, you can't refuse, not to someone like Valens. So you get to work again. The process feels different now. Every hammer strike echoes more deeply in your mind. You can't stop thinking about that night of silence, how unnatural it felt, how alive it seemed. You tell yourself it was a coincidence, or imagination, or simply the city taking a rare breath. But part of you knows better. Something about that design did change the air, the vibrations, the way sound lived around it. You experiment cautiously this time, adjusting angles, changing materials. You smear layers of resin, soak leather in vinegar and oil. Even consult an old craftsman who once worked on temple doors designed to hum when the wind passed through. He listens patiently, nodding as you describe your invention. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the obedience of it. You mull that over for days.
When the 5 new chariots are complete, they look magnificent, sleeker, darker, lined with subtle bronze inlays that shimmer like candlelight on water. They're not as silent as the original, but they glide smooth and deep, like the purr of a big cat. Controlled quiet, not emptiness. Marcus watches your final test at dusk, arms folded. "You've done it again," he says softly, "though I can't decide if you're brilliant or cursed." "Maybe both," you answer. The parade day arrives. You stand hidden near the Circus Maximus as the crowd gathers, thousands of Romans pressing shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with roasted grain, perfume, and excitement. The senator's procession begins, banners fluttering, horns blaring, horses gleaming. Then, your chariots roll out. The effect is immediate. The sound dips, the crowd gasps, wheels turn without thunder, hooves strike without echo. The chariots glide past as if they were part of a dream. Even the emperor, watching from his balcony, leans forward, visibly intrigued. When it's over, a roar of applause breaks out. The moment is euphoric, surreal. For a few shining seconds, you think you've redeemed yourself, that history might remember you kindly. Then, as the crowd disperses, Valens pulls you aside. "The emperor wants these designs," he says. "He believes they'll be useful in military logistics, stealth, speed, night travel."
You blink. Military? He nods. Imagine troops crossing enemy ground, unheard. Rome could own the world's silence. You feel a chill, sudden and sharp. That's not what I meant it for. Intentions don't matter, Valens says lightly. Results do. That night, back in your workshop, you stare at your hands. They ache, raw and scarred, but steady. You've built something magnificent and dangerous, a thing that can erase the noise of life itself. You write a note to Marcus. "If I disappear, feed the cat, and tell the world silence was a mistake." Historians, of course, still argue about what happened next. Some claim you destroyed your designs, burning them in the forge until the metal screamed. Others say you hid them beneath the floorboards, sealing the blueprints inside clay jars. A few even believe Valens confiscated them for the army, and that your chariots rode in secret campaigns across Gaul or Germania, silent as ghosts in the night. Whatever the truth, the records show this much. Your name vanishes from the guild rolls that year. No burial, no arrest, no mention in civic documents. Just gone. One scholar centuries later called you the craftsman who fell into his own quiet. Another suggested your silence was voluntary, that you left Rome altogether, seeking a place where no one would ask you to weaponize peace. Marcus, in a later letter, wrote, "He was a fool, a genius, and my best friend. If you ever ride through a Roman road and hear nothing but wind, that's him, laughing." And so your story begins to shift from memory into myth. The man who built silence, then disappeared into it.
Centuries drift by like dust settling on marble. The empire weakens, fractures, and folds into the mists of time. Roads crumble, aqueducts dry. The once loud heart of Rome slows to a soft, tired beat. And somewhere beneath all that ruin, your blueprints sleep, hidden, waiting, or perhaps forgotten altogether. The world moves on. It's the 9th century now, and the monks of Monte Cassino rise before dawn to chant in stone corridors colder than logic.
Their breath fogs in the air as they copy ancient scrolls by lamplight, ink pooling like midnight on parchment. One of them, Brother Theodoric, finds something curious wedged between two crumbling ledgers, a faint sketch of a wheel, annotated in Latin, that's older than the monastery itself. He frowns, tracing the faint circles with a trembling finger. "A cart," he whispers. "No, a chariot." The lines are delicate but strange, metal meeting leather in configurations no ordinary craftsman would dream of. And there in the margin a single phrase, Machina Silentii, machine of silence. Theodoric smiles faintly, thinking it poetic nonsense, but the abbot, when he sees it, doesn't laugh. "This may be Roman," he says. "Preserve it." And so the sketch is recopied, line by line, into a new codex titled Mirabilia Mechanica, Wonders of Machines. By candlelight, the monks debate its purpose. "Perhaps it was meant to honor God through quiet labor," says one. "Or to help carry relics without disturbance," offers another. A third murmurs, "Maybe it was an attempt to silence sin itself." You can almost hear yourself sighing across the centuries. They've turned your workshop experiment into a sermon. As the years pass, the idea of the silent chariot spreads through abbeys and scriptoria. The drawing changes with each hand that copies it. Some add wings, claiming it was meant to fly. Others replace the wheels with orbs, describing it as a vessel that moves without touching the earth. By the time it reaches the libraries of Cluny and Canterbury, your simple design has become half miracle, half myth. The monks begin including small prayers beside the image. "Lord, grant that our burdens roll smoothly as the wheels of silence." Historians still argue whether this reinterpretation began as innocent metaphor or early science fiction. One medieval scholar in Paris even suggested that the Machina Silentii was an allegory for divine grace, motion without friction, purpose without pride. But the story doesn't end there. In the 12th century, a monk named Bernard of Chartres adds a peculiar note to the margins of his copy. "Said to have been built by a Roman, whose chariot made no sound, and for this he was feared." Feared. The word clings to the parchment like a whisper of guilt. From there, legends bloom. Travelers claim to see shadow carts gliding across moonlit roads. Pilgrims swear that on quiet nights near the ruins of Ostia, one can hear a faint hum, a wheeled ghost searching for peace. You've become a bedtime story for monks. The irony would amuse you. One particularly curious tale from 1273 describes a Benedictine craftsman who tried to recreate the silent chariot using oiled walnut wood and linen-wrapped rims. The account ends abruptly. He vanished the night before the trial, and his tools were found still warm. Whether that's true or not, who can say? Monks love a good mystery. But the design endured, copied again and again, each iteration further from the original. By the Renaissance, your name is lost, but your idea has a new life. Scholars like Brunelleschi and Leonardo da Vinci study ancient mechanics and occasionally stumble across references to the Roman of the silent wheels.
One of Leonardo's notebooks even contains a tiny sketch, a cart with internal cushioning and annotations on acoustic control. Did he find a copy of your blueprints? Historians still argue that point, of course. Some claim coincidence. Others whisper of continuity, knowledge passed like a hidden flame from craftsman to craftsman, monastery to monastery, each adding a little more faith and a little less fact. Either way, by the time the Middle Ages fade into dawn, your quiet chariot has traveled further than you ever did, through parchment, through rumor, through the slow heartbeat of curiosity that never dies. And though no one speaks your name, the monks keep praying to your ghost every time their carts creak under the weight of grain or holy relics. In one final medieval manuscript, written in faded Gothic script, there's a note that feels like a sigh from the past. The silence of the Roman lingers still, and we are all his passengers. You would have liked that.
By the time the Renaissance truly dawns, the silence you engineered has turned into something louder than sound: inspiration. Florence hums with ambition, and in the corner of a cluttered workshop, a young apprentice named Matteo pores over a dusty codex he found in the convent library. The parchment is stiff and brown, its edges chewed by centuries of candle soot. At the top of one page, drawn in perfect medieval symmetry, sits your Machina Silencii. The ink is faint, but the design still holds. 4 wheels, inner suspension arcs, and notations in Latin so archaic that Matteo has to squint to make sense of them. Silent as sleep, one line reads, glides upon its own accord. His master, a portly man with the patience of geometry itself, glances over and laughs. Forget that old fantasy, boy. The ancients drew all manner of nonsense. But Matteo can't let it go. He spends nights sketching improvements by candlelight, adding gears, pulleys, and a counterweight made from hammered bronze. To him, it isn't magic. It's math wrapped in mystery, a puzzle left unsolved. One evening, lightning cracks over the Arno. The rain rattles the roof. The city sleeps, but Matteo keeps drawing, hands trembling as though guided by some echo centuries deep. When dawn arrives, his parchment shows something remarkably close to a 16th century suspension carriage. Smooth rolling, balanced, quiet. And somewhere, perhaps beyond time, the ghost of your curiosity stirs. Across Europe, others are having the same dream. Engineers in Prague, clockmakers in Nuremberg, cartwrights in Venice, all chasing motion refined by silence. The idea has taken root. By 1600, the Roman of the silent wheels becomes a favored legend among natural philosophers. A French savant named Etienne Moreau publishes a treatise called De Arte Tacita, on the art of silence, claiming that early Romans had discovered the secret of elastic materials. He's mostly guessing, but guessing well. He writes, "If a chariot could move without the world hearing it, would that not be divine? Would not silence be proof of perfect design?" It's a rhetorical question, but it plants something subtle in the minds of Europe's inventors. As the centuries advance, carriages evolve, from rumbling wooden frames to cushioned coaches gliding through cobblestone streets. Springs, dampers, and shock absorbers, all inventions whose lineages in some secret way trace back to your first experiment under the Roman sun. By 1750, noblemen in powdered wigs and satin breeches glide through Paris in whispering carriages. Their wheels are wrapped in soft leather, their axles oiled with whale fat and olive grease. The street urchins point and laugh, calling them les voitures des fantômes, the ghost wagons. How fitting! And though no one remembers you by name,
philosophers begin to debate the ethics of mechanical quietudenance. Some claim silence in motion is refinement. Others fear it hides deceit. One German pamphlet calls it an unnatural calm against the spirit of man and matter. But your idea survives every argument because the world is falling in love with smoothness. By the 18th century, neoclassical painters, those same who idolize Roman perfection, begin illustrating the legend itself. In grand halls and candlelit salons, artists display oil paintings of the O Roman Silenzi, a half-mythic figure guiding a wheel through marble corridors. He is depicted as serene, solitary, sometimes divine, a bringer of peace through invention, the embodiment of motion made pure. Your ghost has become a muse. The age of enlightenment takes hold. Rationality replaces superstition, but not entirely. Scholars rediscover the Mirabila Mechanica manuscripts preserved in monastic libraries. Antiquarians debate their origins. One Jesuit scholar insists they're proof of Roman experimental science, lost in the smoke of empire. Another scoffs and says, or perhaps it was only metaphor, Rome teaching us that all motion must end in stillness. Still, a third wonders aloud. What if the Roman meant to silence not the chariot, but the chaos within man? Across time, your silence becomes a mirror, each age seeing its own reflection in it. Then comes the century of thunder, the Industrial Revolution. Iron replaces wood, steam replaces wind. The streets fill with clatter again, with shrieking pistons and the groan of gears. Silence is lost, and with it, a certain grace. But even amid that noise, there are a few who remember. In 1823, an English inventor named Jonathan Burrell files a patent for noise reduction wheel mountings for carriages. In his notes, he writes, "Inspired by a medieval drawing seen in a monastery near Avignon, attributed to an ancient Roman mechanic whose chariot made no sound. Your ghost, it seems, still whispers in the ears of dreamers." And so the wheels keep turning, through centuries, through civilizations, each rotation a faint echo of your forgotten workshop, where one man once wondered if motion could ever be as soft as thought. Because that, in truth, is what you invented, not a machine, but an idea. The idea that progress need not roar to be real. By the 19th century, as railroads carve across continents and soot blackens the sky, poets begin to mourn the loss of quiet craftsmanship. They write elegies to stillness, hymns to subtlety. In one forgotten notebook from 1889, a German engineer scrawls in pencil, "What if the future belongs not to the loudest engines, but to the ones that disappear into their own silence?" If only he knew, he was still tracing the shadow of your wheel.
It's early spring in the modern age now, the century of electric dreams, satellites, and self-driving cars. And somewhere in Rome, where motorbikes buzz and espresso machines hiss like impatient spirits, a young researcher named Julia steps into the Vatican's secret archives with a single purpose: to find proof of you. The air is cold, and the shelves are endless. Each row hums faintly with the weight of centuries. Dust motes drift like lazy fireflies through light from tall windows. Julia's sneakers squeak as she moves. She isn't here for religion, not tonight. She's here for a footnote, a cryptic mention in a 15th century catalog describing an ancient diagram of wheels that turned without noise, believed to be Roman. For weeks, she's chased it through cross-referenced indices and brittle manuscripts. Tonight, she finally finds the folder, yellowed parchment bound in red thread. Her hands tremble as she unfolds it. There it is, the wheel.
Your wheel. Drawn in that same measured hand, annotated in faded Latin. But beside it, a second script has been added later, a Renaissance scribe's hand, neat and curious. No man knows the maker of this, yet silence endures. Julia exhales, smiling. Her colleagues might dismiss this as myth, but she feels the pulse of the story, that thin, invisible thread running from your ancient workbench to her sterile research desk. She traces the ink lines with her fingertip, as if touching your thought directly through time. Outside, Rome's traffic thrums like a restless sea. Horns, scooters, footsteps, vendors shouting, the same eternal city sound you once wished to quiet. For a moment, Julia closes her eyes and imagines what your chariot might have sounded like, or rather, what it didn't sound like. She sees it gliding down a moonlit Appian way, the air thick with stillness, the only noise the slow heartbeat of the driver. And she laughs softly, because maybe that's what you really invented. Not silence in motion, but peace inside chaos. Historians still argue whether your contraption ever existed. Some say it's allegory, the silence of knowledge against the clamor of ignorance. Others insist fragments of your design were later rediscovered in Byzantine engineering manuscripts. A few radical voices even suggest the early pneumatic concept originated with you. But does it matter? You've become what all inventors secretly wish to be, an idea larger than invention. Your ghost drifts quietly through every workshop, from Da Vinci's sketches to Tesla's laboratories, whispering the same question you asked under that Roman sun. Can motion be gentle? Modern engineers, surrounded by the growl of engines and the hum of power plants, are once again obsessed with quiet. Every car company, every tech firm, every architect chases acoustic perfection, the same dream you dreamed 2,000 years ago. A few even call it Roman silence, a nod, perhaps, to the myth of the ancient mechanic who tried to silence the empire's wheels. And as machines grow quieter, the world itself seems to listen more closely. Electric cars glide by like ghosts. Drones hum softly in the distance. Headphones cancel the roar of life into stillness. Humanity, after centuries of noise, finally understands what you meant. That progress doesn't have to shout. That the truest innovation hums beneath hearing, felt more than heard. If you stood here now in the soft glow of Julia's study lamp, you'd smile. The dream you built from clay and olive oil and stubborn will has survived empires, languages, revolutions. The wheel keeps turning, endlessly refining its silence. And maybe that's the quietest miracle of all, how a single thought, once whispered in a Roman workshop, can echo softly across millennia. Now, as night deepens over the Tiber and the city's sounds fade into a low urban hush, the story of your silent chariot comes full circle. You started it with motion. We finish it with rest. So, close your eyes. Let the roads grow still. Picture that empty chariot gliding into the distance, its wheels kissing the stones without a whisper. The stars hang low over Rome. The air is calm. The noise of the day finally dissolves into velvet dark. You have invented peace.
Everything slows now. The rhythm of footsteps, the turning of wheels, even thought itself begins to settle. The last flickers of candlelight melt into the walls, and the air becomes heavy with quiet.
You drift alongside the memory of your creation, that smooth curve of wood, that faint scent of resin. You can almost hear the hush of ancient air brushing past your face, cool and dry, carrying with it 1,000 years of calm. Every sound you once chased away returns now only as a gentle pulse, the rhythm of your own breathing, the steady echo of your heart, the faint whisper of fabric shifting as you move. The streets of Rome fade into moonlight. The clamor of the city dims into distant murmurs. There's nothing left but the soft lull of history folding into sleep. You've traveled through time tonight, across dusty workshops, roaring empires, and neon skylines, all the way to this quiet place where invention meets rest. Here, silence isn't an absence, it's a reward. So breathe, let your shoulders loosen, let the world blur. The wheels have stopped, the work is done, and all that remains is stillness. Listen, not for noise, but for its opposite. That's where you'll find him, the Roman who once dreamed of peace through motion. And in that still space between each breath, you find it too. Good night.